echo, Zan. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the YDC's Juvenile Justice Committee. And I am going to pass the baton at this point to Melissa and Anya.
I can take roll call unless you want to say anything else, Anya, before we do that. I know some folks are still joining if we want to give them a few minutes before I take roll.
Well, maybe while people are joining, we could introduce Vicky. So you probably know that Joy Snyder is on leave. And while she is out, Vicky Johnson has kindly agreed to work with us in her absence, actually now in Tunisia's absence as well. We have a baby boom in the agency. We just had 2 sets of babies. Which is very happy for the babies and their mothers, but Vicky is here to help us live through that period. So Vicky, would you like to say a few words?
I'm excited to be here. It's kind of a full circle moment for me. I graduated in education almost 40 years ago and went into juvenile justice for 35 years, and now have come back to the education division. So that's kind of a cool thing. Maybe it's a period on the end of my career now that I've done both things I went to college for. So I'm glad to be here and willing to support you in whatever way you need.
Vicky, we're so grateful to have you. Honestly, thank you. Well, Melissa, I think we're ready for the roll call.
Sure. Zan Ojiro? You are muted.
Present.
Zan. I know
Sorry,
that you're here.
it took me a while to unmute.
All right. Daniela Avila, Andrew Copeland, Molly Craig, Bobby Devine, Caitlin Edgar.
Present.
Adam Henning.
Present.
Nella, is it Nella Hogberg? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes, present.
Thank you. Jeff Justison. Charles Kokelax.
Here.
Nate Latanzio.
Here.
Kim Le. Andy Leonard. Annette Magicotami. Deborah Martin. Christina McMahon. That is it for our council, including community members. Anya, back to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Well, I think we're back to Zan, who has kindly offered to facilitate the meeting. And I think Zan, our presenter, is ready. I can see Juliette on the screen.
Okay, I don't have an agenda in front of me, but I will welcome Juliette to present the survey, the results of the study.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen because I have some slides to walk through, and I just will do that first and get started. Let's see if I can. All right. Can everybody see that?
Yes, it looks great.
Great. So I'm Juliette Mackin from NPC Research. We are the contracted program evaluators for the Juvenile Crime Prevention Program, which we've been doing for a long time. And every 2 years for the funding cycle, the biennium, we provide an evaluation summary. So that's the report and presentation that we have for you today. I know many of you have been aware of JCP and following the trends for many years. And so I look forward to your feedback and your input as well. And any of you who are new to this work, if you have questions, please feel free to ask as we go along. I am with the Zoom screen, can only see a few people at one time. So if I miss you and you have your hand up or you want to add a comment or a question, please feel free to do that. Or if someone else notices and I do not, please holler to me. So what we're going to do today is talk about the overview of the JCP, Juvenile Crime Prevention, JCP evaluation findings for the most recent biennium, which was the 2023-2025 budget cycle. So the background I will do, I know many of you have all of this information previously, but I just wanted to quickly do a background for anyone who's new. The Juvenile Crime Prevention Program supports intervention and prevention programming across all 36 counties and 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon. The goal is to serve young people who are at risk of engaging in criminal behavior and to prevent this criminal behavior. When youth begin receiving JCP services, they are administered the JCP assessment tool, which measures a variety of risk and protective factors in 6 different domains. And those domains show on your screen in the blue bar to the right-hand side. Youth are assessed for risk related to school and academics, their behavior, family functioning and communication, substance use, peers and peer relationships, and attitudes, values, and beliefs. The tool also collects information about mental health indicators, and so we'll talk a little bit about that information as well. The assessment is initially administered at intake, and for youth who are in the community, that usually is because they're referred to some type of program. If they are in contact, if youth are in contact with the juvenile justice system, the county juvenile departments, that often happens in person at the department. But at some point at the beginning of service, we have what we call this initial assessment, and then the assessment is conducted again every 6 months or so, depending on the particular program or the particular jurisdiction, so that we can look at change over time. And we call those reassessments. So some of the information that we'll talk about is to be able to look at what is the profile of the youth who are being served in JCP or by our prevention programs particularly, and then what is the status of the change that we're seeing over time in risk and protective factors. We also will have some information about the criminal behavior of those youth, so that we do take a look every 2 years at which youth have had additional criminal contacts with the juvenile justice system. Because of the structure of our programming, not every youth who's seen or served actually has a full JCP assessment. So these data reflect the ones that we obtain. And then there is also a subset of the JCP risk and protective factors that are included in what we call a quick screen, or a screening tool that has a subset of items. We do have some data about the quick screen as well. So we'll start with the idea that I mentioned is first entry point. What do the risk and protective factors look like for youth, so that you can see the population that we're talking about, or that JCP is serving? So this first description is to look at demographic characteristics. So most of the youth in our JCP sample are white. That's the large purple box here, about 59%. And then our Latinx group is the next largest population, 19%. We have 7% who identify as multiracial, 6% each identify as Black or Native American. And then we have 2% of our youth identify as Asian, and 1% identifies as an additional race or ethnicity that's not one of these. We also have our groups identified through gender. 61% of our population is identified as male, 38% female, and 2% have another identification. In this cycle, we had about 2,700 youth who were served, and about 2,400 of them are part of the evaluation because we received both their assessment and permission to utilize the information. The process of collecting that information includes a consent process for youth who are in the community. And so we have to have permission to be able to include the data as part of the assessments. The range of youth who were served is 7 to 18 years old. Our population focus is 10 to 17. We tend to have some additional discretion in programs around somewhat younger or somewhat older youth. Primarily the older youth are youth who started services and then were continuing to complete those services as they turned 18. The average age of our group here is 14 years old. So when youth enter JCP services, they complete an initial risk assessment. There are 30 different scored risk and protective factors on this assessment. And so that means that when we talk about risk score, the risk score can range from 0 to 30. There are a lot of additional risk and protective factors that are included as part of the comprehensive assessment that are used for case planning purposes or for referral to additional services. But that scored tool has 30 potential points. On the left-hand side, you can see that we have 3 general risk categories or risk levels: low, medium, and high. The low risk youth are in that 0 to 5 score range, and the medium risk ranges from 6 to 13. Any youth who has 14 or more risk factors, we consider to be high risk. And just to note that we have 24 risk factors and 6 protective factors. If youth are lacking a protective factor, that counts towards their score as a point. So a risk factor scores as a point and a lack of a protective factor scores as a point. In the current population, the average risk was 8. So moderate risk, medium risk. That was a compilation of 6 risk factors and 2 missing protective factors. And there are 6 different domains, as you saw on the prior slide. Out of those 6 domains, most youth on average had 3 of them. For JCP eligibility, we ask that youth have 2, so at least 1 risk or missing protective factor in 2 or more of the domains. And so the youth tend to have issues across more areas than is actually the minimum. And you can see in the center visual, we have pretty comparable low and medium risk groups. And then about 17% of our group is that higher risk 14 or higher scores. So to give you a sense of what we see over time for risk and protective factors, I want to mention we see a lot of consistency in some of the most common factors. In the last decade, so since the 2015 cycle, we took a look at what were the common factors, and we see in the on the left-hand side are those common protective factors. So having an adult in the youth's life that they can talk to, friends who are academic achievers, and then communicating effectively with family members. Those tend to be the areas where we see strength. In the right-hand side, we have those most common risk factors. So having friends who are having challenges in school or having academic difficulty, friends who are engaging in unlawful behavior, and then youth who are not attending school. At the bottom, we've included some information from some of our validation studies that take a look at what are these really strong predictors of reoffending or of initial criminal contact with the justice system. And so runaway, either recent or chronic, having multiple criminal referrals, and truancy tend to be those kind of powerful risk predictors of reoffending. We are just at the starting point of being able to conduct a new validation study this year. So we will soon or by next year have some updated information if you're interested in that about what we're seeing with the more recent JCP data.
Hey, Juliette.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Brian Detman, Youth Development Director. I'm pausing here because the chat is filling with.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I
No,
wasn't.
no, they're not questions. They're technical difficulties.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Judge Koklak and Melissa, a few people can't hear. I can hear you, and you were
You can
able
hear
to.
me okay?
Melissa and
I can hear. Sorry, I was responding. This is Melissa. I was responding to Judge Koklak's message, and it quoted it. So I can hear. I think
see.
it's just on Judge Koklak's
Yeah,
end with audio issues. So,
yeah. Judge, is there any way you can sign off and sign back in or
Or phone in, maybe?
phone in? Yep, you're right, Juliette. I don't know if we can hear, Judge, if you want to say something, maybe we can tell you if we can even hear you, because maybe that's part of the issue. We heard you when we did the roll call, though, so.
that's true.
Although I actually don't see, oh, good, okay. I see the judge is here, but
Mhm.
not on video, so maybe we can take a second, Judge, for you to log out and log back in. That's my recommendation.
And Melissa, you're doing a recording as well, is that
That's correct. Thank
correct?
you.
So we do have it available potentially.
Yes.
Hmm. Well, not hearing anything from the judge. Zan is fine, Vicky's fine, most folks are fine. All right, Juliet, I bet you should keep moving, and then Judge, we'd encourage you to, yeah, Lawrence, exactly saying to log out and log in. Maybe that will get.
Okay.
Thanks, Juliet.
Oh, absolutely. Are you okay with me proceeding? I don't want to have anybody miss anything, but
Seems like you should probably keep going because I'm not seeing. And then, and there's a question from Nate in the chat. Can you see that, Juliet?
let me open that.
I can read it if you want, since I'm talking. What is the current version of the JCP assessment used in this data?
Yes. So we have there are two different versions of the assessment tool that are very, very similar. They were based on a 2006 revision, but in 2021 and 22, they were updated with additional definitions. So each of the risk and protective factors, we incorporated some additional explanation, guidance, and support from the research around what went into each of the risk and protective factors and how to score them. So when we give, so when people use the tool, it's also part of our training, but there's information that says, what does it mean to be a recent or chronic runaway? What are the criteria under which you give someone the risk factor 3 or more criminal referral? So there's some different explanations there and some guidance around how to gather the information. So that 2021 was really the most updated version of the tool. We also expanded some of the demographic criteria or characteristics with some additional options. So, but the most recent validations that we conducted were in, I think, the 2018, 2019 range. The full statewide one was from 2011. And so this in terms of validating the tool again and checking on kind of our current data that will be happening this year. Did that help? So the 2021 version of the tool is the most recent one. Okay. So anyway, in terms of the kind of common factors, it's not surprising that peers, friends are important factors in terms of youth, especially for this age group. Oh, looks like we need Nate to come back. Okay. All right. So in addition to the 6 domains, I mentioned that there's also some information about mental health that we include. There are 5 kind of screening items that we have on the assessment tool. They're located on this left-hand side in the dark blue bar, and they're all related to our risk of juvenile justice involvement, but are not scored items on the tool. They're helpful for us to understand the context of the youth that we're working with, and also to identify areas that youth might need additional screening or support. So it's important to note that we have many youth who are facing some of these pretty serious mental health factors, and actually 1 in 8 have 3 or more of these 5 factors. So lots of challenge happening with the youth that are being served in these prevention programs. About half, though, don't have one of these. So there is definitely a range of need in this area. When we look at youth by their risk level, we also see that the high-risk youth are more likely to have more than one of the mental health need. And that 1 in 8 is translates into 13% of youth with 3 or more. This chart has kind of a lot going on, and there are several that have a lot going on. I'll try to do the highlights. Just wanted to mention that we have separated out the youth who have, based on their initial assessment. So this is at the initial assessment by risk level. So on the left-hand side, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but the left-hand set of bars is those youth who have none of the mental health indicators. So none of these factors to the left. You'll see that this highest group who have no factors are in the low risk category. So that gray bar in the middle, that 74% of the low risk youth have none. In the category of youth who have one of these factors, there's not any particular one, but one of any of these 5, you'll see the range of the different percentages based on the overall purple and then by risk level. And then those youth who have more than one factor, you can see the high risk youth, that bright blue bar, 50% have more than one.
Juliette, this is Melissa letting you know we can see your cursor. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. I realized I don't have like a pointer, but that's good. I'm glad you can see it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. And then this is a similar pattern than we've seen over the last several years as well. So I just wanted to point out, again, for many of you who've seen some of these data over the years, just to show you where things have varied or where things are staying the same. And that's a consistent pattern that we see. Okay, so some of our outcomes, we look to see whether or not youth have changed over time, changed their risk score or risk levels over time. And so in our data, we have youth who have the initial assessment and a reassessment so that we can look at change. The average length of service, so between the average time, even though that varies widely, the average time between their initial and their reassessment is 19 months, so about 1.5 years. For that group, we see some reduced risk, 42%. We have some of that group that have seen some increases in the number of risk factors, and then some that have stayed the same. So we have about 1/4 of our youth who stay at the same score, and then some youth who have seen reductions. Our goal, of course, with risk is to see things stay the same or not to improve or not to increase, excuse me. So our ideal is to see this programming helping us to reduce risk factors and reduce the child's likelihood of coming into contact. Of course, because we have low and moderate risk youth, staying the same is also good for some of those youth. So we want to make sure we kind of focus on where is this happening, that we're seeing some increases. We know that youth who have risk factors over time tend to accumulate more. So it is not surprising that over a year and a half, as youth mature and get older and have more contacts in some of these areas, we might see evolving risks, but it is something that the focus of programming is to kind of mitigate those changes as much as possible. I just wanted to note that when we look at the distinction between risk level and change, the low risk youth are the ones that we're seeing some increases. That may be in some cases because the initial assessment doesn't have all of the information, or it could be that because of their age maturation, or they are not in as intensive services, they may start to accumulate a few more. So they see an average of about 2 points over time. The medium risk youth are not seeing that change. We're not really seeing changes in that group. And the high risk youth are experiencing a decrease by, on average, about 3 points. So the high risk youth who have more going on, who are often the focus of many of these programs, are seeing risk reductions of about 3 points on average. So one of the key takeaway findings is that we see reduction in this high risk group. 80% of our high risk youth are having a reduction or staying in the same in risk level at the reassessment. Of course, that's compared to about 66% of youth in the entire sample from the chart that you saw before. Out of that group, even though they're reducing their score, many of them, about 60% of them, are still staying high risk. They just have a lower score. But 37% of them actually reduce their score to the point where they're moving into the moderate risk level, and a few of them end up low risk. So really nice to see some of the impacts of the programs on this risk, or this likelihood of future involvement. Our high risk youth group, by the way, even though the range of high risk is 14 or older, or 14 or greater, the average risk score for the high risk group is about 17. So 17 different risk factors. In this chart, we're just showing the most common change that we see around protection. So we mentioned that access to a supportive adult is a strong protective factor, and it's someplace that we really see improvements based on our group of youth in JCP programming. Excuse me. So these are the three areas that we see kind of the biggest change. These protective factors, in addition to being in and of themselves related to justice involvement, have this extra benefit of buffering youth against the impact of other risk factors. So in addition to losing the risk, if you gain a protective factor, you reduce the risk score, you also help protect the youth from the other kinds of factors that they have. This is really important because we tend to see youth who are the same level of risk. If they have protective factors, they're less likely to commit crime than if they don't have them. And so it's really substantially, it's a notable change for us in terms of being able to see these adjustments change over time in these protective factors. So in addition to providing access to a supportive adult, we also see improvements in communication and improvements with educational attachment. Again, these are areas that tend to be pretty common over time in terms of the strengths of our JCP programs. In addition to the protections, of course, we have the risk factors. These are the areas that we tend to see large changes. And I should mention, these percentages are based on the youth who have these factors at the initial assessment. So out of the youth who have aggressive or disruptive behavior at school, or who have the runaway risk factor, when we look at the second time point or the most recent reassessment, these are the youth who no longer have that factor. So very substantial changes in these specific risk areas. around and particularly notable some of these very strong relationships with our justice involvement. So very important finding. Other things that we thought were interesting to share: at the initial assessment, we had about one in four, about 24% of youth have the antisocial thinking kind of attitudes, values, and beliefs factor. Something that is, again, very consistently related to justice involvement. We have about 44%, so not quite half of our youth, have involvement in constructive extracurricular activities. That is something that we've talked about over the years, that one of those areas that is difficult is not every youth has something productive or safe to do in their out of school time. And so definitely important to build on that area, since it's it's an area of need in our youth consistently over time, and such an opportunity to build the strengths and supports for youth in our communities. We always like to highlight school domain in particular. It is one of our 6 domains, and because we are housed within, or Youth Development Oregon is housed within the Department of Education, very important to take a look at our specific risk factors related to the academic environment. So these decreases are also really notable. Reductions in academic failure, so that increasing the opportunity for youth to succeed in school and pass their classes and pass their grades, reconnecting them into school and helping them attend. And I think very substantially, those youth who had already dropped out of school, almost half of them were reconnected at the reassessment, by the reassessment time point, to some other, whether they were in school, their own school, or some other educational environment. Really important to see stabilization across these areas. All right, any questions so far? I'm going to move into some of the crime area, so I want to make sure. Please do holler if you have questions. Okay, so these are going to start to talk about some of the data related to justice involvement. And again, some of these charts have a lot going on, and I'm just going to do some of the highlights, and we'll be sharing out the report and the slides if people are interested in poring over them a little bit more. So we have in JCP, in our juvenile crime prevention programming, we have both youth who have already had a contact with the justice system and youth who have not. So we have our purely community prevention youth, and we have youth in the juvenile departments. And so we tried to differentiate kind of what the patterns are for the youth who have had criminal referrals and those who don't. In our recidivism analyses, we are only looking at criminal referrals, so contacts that have a criminal allegation. We don't include, for purposes of the crime conversation, status offenses. So they may have still had a contact with the juvenile department, if for things like runaway or truancy, or minor in possession of alcohol, those kinds of status offenses, but those aren't included in the crime reduction numbers. So criminal referrals, this kind of traditional definition in Oregon of recidivism looked at 12 months. And then we have added, as the state has added, looking at a longer time period. So across 12 months, 24 months, and 36 months. Yes, I see a question.
Thank you. Zan speaking, for the record. This is an interesting pattern to me, to see that the youth with no priors have, if I'm reading this correctly, a higher rate, no, a declining rate of not recidivating. This is hard to say because of,
I know it's confusing.
And well, and so do the high risk youth. But I'm wondering about age as well. Do you also have these data sorted by age category? Um, and is
Yes.
there a relationship to kind of age and maturity as well as risk?
Yes. Let me look and see if I have it for today. I know I have it separated out. I'm trying to remember if we have, yes, I have age coming up. So I will talk about that in just a second. So, and those are definitely considerations, and I'll explain a little bit more here because in a couple of that does affect things in a couple of different ways. So in the turquoise bar, that middle bar here, are the group that came into JCP. Our starting point is their assessment point. So when they get assessed at intake, they're going to start JCP, or maybe they've had a contact for the youth in the gray bar, they've had a contact with the juvenile department. But those blue bar youth are the kids that came into contact, JCP, got an assessment. 12 months later, they have had no criminal referrals, so no police reports, no contact with the justice system. We would expect many of these are our low and moderate risk group, but 92% of them in 1 year did not come into contact. We see that number decrease a little bit over 3 years because, as you said, they're getting older. We're still seeing most of them not having any contact, but by 3 years out, we sometimes do see, some of them are having a contact. Since all of them have some risk factors, it's not completely surprising, but our goal, and I'll show that in a few more slides, I'll show you what we would expect to see based on their risk levels and what we actually are seeing, which is moving the bar from what we would see otherwise by their risk score to some improvements. So at least there's some good news. We do see that the youth who already have priors, and we know that's one of the major predictors of coming into contact again, is that a little bit smaller of that, a smaller proportion of that group still avoids criminal contact that first year, but most of them. And then that number does decrease a little bit over time each year. These are different groups of youth in these different time points, because what will happen is youth age out of our juvenile system, and if they have a new arrest or a new referral, it ends up in the adult system. And so this time period in order to get a full 12 months for the youth in the follow-up, these are youth who are not older than 17. So they have to have not turned 17. By this point, they can't be older than 15. And so we've got our youth who started off a little bit younger that we're looking at, because in order to have 3 years of follow-up, they have to be younger. So it's because currently we've been working on trying to get adult data, and we thought that we had made some progress there. As it turns out, the records that JJUS has include youth only who are under their jurisdiction. And so we do have some of the kind of over 18 records, but not a full summary compared to all of the youth in JCP. Most of them, we don't have their adult records. So we at some point, so this will be an underrepresentation potentially of any youth who would have, it doesn't include all the youth, because if we do that, we don't have their full time period, if that makes sense. I hope I didn't just overly confuse people, but basically the idea is we see some additional criminal involvement over time. That's not totally surprising, because they're going to have more opportunity in 3 years than in 12 months, but also this is a slightly different population. So they're kids that were already being served younger. So a couple of the takeaways here are most of our youth, 83% of the youth that have no criminal involvement before JCP continue to not have criminal involvement after, even up to 3 years after. And then about a quarter of our youth who did have priors still have no involvements after 3 years. Any other questions on that, or should I get to the age one? All right, so just as you were asking, we do have some information now. I know if the last chart was too much, this is going to be way too much. This is a lot of information in one place, but the takeaway is that younger youth were less likely to have criminal referrals at all of the follow-up periods. We do have this separated out by age, the 8 to 12-year-olds compared to the 13 to 18-year-olds. And again, the same pattern where we have the purple is the full group, anyone who had a full 12-month follow-up. And then the blue bar is the youth that did not have priors, and the gray bar is the youth that did have priors, and prior meaning prior criminal involvement. So, any questions on that one? All right, now we're going to dice things up again and look at it by gender. So this may not surprise anybody, but our rates of referrals are similar for the youth who have prior criminal involvements, but female youth in general had fewer referrals compared to males. And then again, this is males than females at the 12 months out, 24 months out, 36 months out. Okay, I'm going to switch over from referrals to detention, another measure of justice involvement. And this shows both youth with and without criminal involvement prior. So again, that same pattern, looking to see youth who had detention stays within those 3 time points. So 12 months, 24 months, and 36 months. Most of our youth who did not have any prior criminal involvement avoided detention for all 3 years. About half who had some criminal involvement had no detention for that full 3-month period. Sorry, 3-year period. And again, we see the changes where most of the youth are avoiding any kind of detention stay in that first year, and it changes a little bit over time. We have the same breakout if you're interested and want to take a look at that by age. So our fewer younger youth having detention than our older youth. And then also by gender, fewer female youth had detention compared to male youth in general. The other way that we tried to take a look at this information was by risk level. And so the youth who have the low risk youth are, of course, the least likely to have a criminal referral. So they're the most likely to be able to avoid criminal involvement. High risk youth are the most likely. And then again, high risk youth are the most likely to end up with a detention stay. That low risk bar are the gray groups. The medium risk is that navy blue, and the high risk group is the brightest blue color. And then this is the chart that I like to share to really help us have some context around what we would expect. So in our validation studies, we looked to see what was the ratio, what was the proportion of youth or the likelihood of youth reoffending at different points in different risk scores. And so for our low risk youth, we tend to see about at 4 risk factors, 4 or 5 risk factors, about 25% of them having a new criminal referral within 12 months. In our low risk sample, that was about 12%. So very much kind of half of the rate that we would expect. Similarly, with our medium risk group, that group is that at 9 risk factors, we have about 50% of the youth will have a criminal referral. In our medium risk group, it's about 27%. And for high risk youth, once youth reach 14 risk factors, their probability is 75%. For our high risk group, and we know that's an average of 17 risk factors, we're seeing about 44% with that, the reoffending or the contact. So just kind of keeping in mind, while we don't want any of our youth, our goal is prevention. We don't want them reaching the justice system or re-engaging. We do see those rates being impacted from what we would expect with our tool based on the JCP validation. We are seeing lower rates of offending. All right, so a couple of key takeaways. We do see most youth who are participating in JCP avoiding criminal recidivism, especially that first year. Most youth, even if they have a criminal referral, have in the prior, avoid that first year. There are a few youth who have really serious risk factors that we're seeing really large reductions. So those youth that have very large numbers of risks, those high risk youth, or significant patterns of risk, we're seeing lots of risk reduction, particularly in the behavior and school domains. So important quality of life changes, important potential for them to have other positive outcomes. We want to be able to see our programs continue to be able to provide additional resources, continue to refer to other supports, especially for those youth that have mental health issues or other risk factors that kind of need additional supports, like, for example, kids who have difficulty with school, really getting additional educational support, youth who have substance use concerns to have additional screening and potentially assessment and treatment in those areas. And we definitely are seeing kids re-engaging in education programs, reductions in dropout, reductions in academic failure, and increases in school attachment. So recommendations, continuing to, of course, implement these services, focusing on education, focusing on social and emotional skills, helping youth access mental health supports. I know that can be really difficult and hard to identify in some communities, some of those resources. Continuing to gather data to understand better what the impact of these services are, being able to gather information on the types of services, the specific activities, and the impacts will be really helpful to continue to support why these programs need to continue. And again, addressing social and emotional skills and mental health needs to continue to provide access to supportive adults and to connect kids with extracurricular activities. So I have my contact information here and my colleague Anna, who helps run the evaluation. I'm happy to take feedback, answer questions, if you'd like to talk. I'm not sure how much time you have allocated for this conversation, but happy to provide any other information, or if there's anything that I can go away and look up and bring back to you or send to you, I'm happy to do that too.
Juliette, we have as long as we need.
All right. Vicki, how did we get to the validation numbers? Yes. So when we conducted the validation study, we took a look at what were the probabilities of youth reoffending based on either having a particular risk factor. So every risk factor on the assessment tool, we looked to see what was the proportion of youth who reoffended if they had that factor versus they didn't, and what is the likelihood. So every indicator on the tool is validated that if you have that one factor, you're more statistically more likely to reoffend, or a youth would be more likely to reoffend than if they didn't have it. And then we looked at the cumulative scores, so all of the different items connected. If we add up how many risks there are, and we did an analysis to see what was the probability of reoffending for each level of risk. So if you have one factor versus 5 factors versus 10 factors, the probabilities at those proportions, like the low risk group, we were being asked at the time to help provide cutoff scores. So juvenile justice would have a way to say, what does a low risk youth mean? And our definition at that time was, how about we do it in quartiles, so 25%, 50%, 75%. And so that's where we looked at those cut points. So the youth that have like 4 to 5 risk factors had 25% chance of reoffending. And so that's what we were using that population at the time. I think we had about 20,000 kids in the sample or something like that, just to see what were those patterns. Now, these are youth who were having contacts. We didn't know at the time, these are all of the youth that we had out of JGIS that had assessments. So we knew some of them were having interventions. But even with that, we knew that if you had a score of 14, you were 75% chance of having a new referral in 12 months and greater. On that scale, we didn't really have any youth that were beyond like 20-ish risks. So the really, really high risk tend to end up, I think, somewhere else, and not with the JCPs. But it was really just taking a look at that big population, anyone who had an assessment, what was the what was their score, and what was the chance that they, within that group of youth who had that risk score, what proportion of them had a new crime. So that's how we got the number. Does that answer your question? Or
so in the 25, the 50, and the 75 are arbitrary numbers?
So those were just when we mapped out all the youth who have 0 through 30 risk scores across a chart, and we looked to see what was the proportion of youth. If you had this number, what was the ratio? We did some calculation. We had a statistical expert who came in and did what would they call an IRT curve. They did an analysis to see what was the probability of reoffending. And so we picked the 50% and just looked at what's a score at 50-50, and we called it moderate risk. So when we were working with the risk work group back then, 25 years ago or whatever, we were trying to figure out what policy could be mapped onto the data. And it was really to take a look at, if these kids are low risk, they're 25% or less likely to come into our system. They need less resource, right? They need less Mm-hmm. Many of them will not reoffend again, even if we do not do anything with them. Mm-hmm. The youth who are that 14 or more, we're going to see most of those. And so we need to have more of our intensive services. Mm-hmm. And this was from a juvenile justice perspective, not necessarily a prevention perspective, but just trying to see what was the intensity of service that was most appropriate. And the moderate risk it depends, right? It depends on what supports they get. It depends on how can we match their needs to their services. And that, so the 25% was really just our way of saying, at what risk score are you 25% chance of reoffending? At what risk score are you 50-50? Mm-hmm. And that's where those points were. Mm-hmm. And then the bands around what is moderate risk, we kind of went, from low risk to high risk. So it's 6 to 13, kind of between the 25 and 75% mark, if that makes sense.
So if I'm looking at that chart from a positive perspective of the services that were provided, the high risk group reoffended, the high risk group were at a 44% probability instead of the 75%. So
Right.
we have, do my math, 21% less that quote unquote reoffended in that group. So you have a 21% savings, if you will, in that group, a 21% protective or non-recidivism
Right.
or better
You have that.
outcomes, better
That's,
outcomes.
that's the impact. Yeah. And really many of those youth actually even had a higher possibility because they were higher than 14. But yes, absolutely. That gap is what we want to see. We want to see, what did we expect and what did we see? And what we saw was better. It was lower.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And on you listed the risk factors as part of your takeaways, the reduction in risk factors. And you stated previously in some of the other slides that there were some positive protective factors that were increased. Could that be a key takeaway as well?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I really think that protective factors are really essential. You get even more power out of those because you get both the risk reduction and you get the buffering impact, essentially. Obviously, reducing risk factors is important. When I talk about reducing their risk score overall, for sure, it's both filling in the gaps around protection and also reducing the risks that are already there or preventing new risks from emerging.
Yeah. Thank you.
But thank you. I could be more clear about that for sure. Absolutely. Focusing on protection is really, really great. And we know that because we have some patterns where some of our protective factors are really strong in this state, and some we've consistently had a hard time filling, like those extracurriculars. That's why these prevention programs, one of the reasons why these are so terrific is that by adding these services, we have youth in touch with positive peers, hopefully, doing positive things with their time, building skills, building confidence, like so many benefits. So thank you. Other questions? Yes, Nate.
Hey there. Thank you so much for the presentation, by the way. It was very engaging.
Good.
Oh, of course. I was curious, and this is more of like, this could be a question to anybody. I'm not sure, just whoever has insight on it. I'm less familiar with it, so it's something I just figured I would throw out there and ask. For the JCP assessment, how is that like when it's like administered? Like, how would like the findings of that, like, is it like very like impactful in terms of a young person? They use the assessment, if they have a high risk score, is that going to like drastically like shift like the support that they receive, or just like the programming or their overall involvement in the system? Like, is it something that it's like, oh, this is just one tool and we use other factors to kind of really decide what to move forward with? Or is it pretty like they go through that assessment and whatever the findings are is going to be pretty like indicative of like the involvement they'll have with the system?
That's a great question. And I'll say a couple things, but I think someone maybe Vicki or maybe someone else who wants to talk from the juvenile department perspective could talk about that. From the prevention programs in the community, often I think what happens is youth are identified because they have some presenting behavior, some concerning behavior, or they have some need, and they're referred to a program. The assessment is to help establish their eligibility for the program, but they're already kind of being referred there. Like, that's the program that they're likely to get. The idea with the assessment is that it could also indicate a referral pathway to other services, but that's not going to typically prevent them from getting that service. From a juvenile justice perspective, there was a goal that the assessment would help identify those youth who need different levels of care or different levels of supervision. So a youth who comes in and gets screened or assessed, if they're very low risk, they might be diverted or they might not get very much intensive service. But if they screen or assess at really high risk, that might indicate that they need more intensive service. So I'm going to pass that to Vicki. I think that's the place where you're probably going to see more likelihood that the assessment would impact the level of service. But could you talk about that, Vicki, or someone?
Yeah. In the juvenile department, like she said, we do come in and we deliver the assessment, and it's not I ask you a question, you give me an answer. It is kind of a rolling conversation. And we take out of that rolling conversation the information that they provide that basically essentially check the boxes. And once we've decided a risk level with that, and if there are any other indicators that maybe are not on the assessment, but that are significantly impacting the youth's ability to function well in the community, we'll take that into account as well. And then, like she said, if there are low risk, we don't want to get in there and do anything that's going to cause additional harm. Most of the low risk youth kind of age out on their own. They mature, they start making better decisions. They figure out what peer group is good for them. They engage in other curricular activities. And so they just kind of raise, if you will, with their parents themselves into a non-criminal type lifestyle. Those that are in the medium and high risk category, in the juvenile department, we actually had probation officers that managed more medium risk kids, and they worked really hard to connect them to services in the community and try to put them on formal accountability agreements, work with not involving them deeply in our system, but trying to do all those community supports. And then our high risk kids was like, wow, we have to be pretty intensive in our step in to abruptly kind of stop this behavior that's going on if it's of a criminal nature, and also address those really high risk things like mental health and substance abuse and self-harm and school failure. So then we start to build a package, and most often those kids are placed on more formal probation so that we can intervene much more aggressively and try to disrupt those behaviors that are going on, while in addition building the supports around them so that when they're done with us, they still have supports. And we're not the only one that's kind of holding the gates, if you will. They've started to engage in things that are much more productive.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I appreciate your wisdom.
Sure, thank you. And just to add, I realized one of the questions you asked was about other information. Certainly in most cases, there's other information that's being collected. So in the juvenile departments, there are other kinds of other pieces of information that the staff will be collecting in addition to the assessment, and sometimes in other programs too. But this is one piece of it. And thank you, Nella. I saw you had a comment too in the chat.
Nella, sorry, this is Melissa. Do you want to read your comment out loud for the recording?
Sure. So the Judicial Department has a kind of packaged project that we've created. We worked with Juliette, I know, a couple years ago on this as well. And it's called the Disposition Improvement Project. We've piloted it in 2 counties, and now it's available for any county to use if they'd like to. All of the resources are available on the website that I dropped in the chat. And really what it is we're hoping and encouraging counties to utilize the JCP prior to disposition, which already happens in lots of counties, but I understand not in all. And the other piece of it is providing a report about the risk assessment to the court, so that the court understands why certain recommendations are being made, and can ensure that services are being matched to the individualized youth. Again, this is already happening in lots of counties. We just created a structure, a kind of standardized structure for that. And actually the report can be created right in JGIS. And so I just wanted to plug that. And Juliette, thanks for being here, and great presentation.
Thank you.
We also have a great little like bench card that's available on that site that kind of shows the different risk levels and suggested best practices for those risk levels.
Awesome. Thank you, Nella, for sharing. And Juliette, thank you so much for the presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And you will hear it again on September 10th in the Dallas.
You'll all be the experts.
So if you still have questions for Juliette between now and September 10th, please let us know. Well, but if you wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh, I should have asked that, you still have a chance.
Yes, if there's something you want shared differently or have any other suggestion around what could help for that September 10th presentation, that'd be great. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Anya, are you okay with me remaining or do I?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we're switching to the federal updates. So
I just wanted to make sure that was okay.
Of course. Oh, thank you so much for sharing the agenda. Then back to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. And we will move on then to the Federal Compliance Monitoring Data Submission Update. Lindsey.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Lindsey, Federal Compliance Monitor for the state of Oregon. We just wrapped up and submitted our data for the fiscal year 2025 period. So I was just going to share a little bit about that stuff with you guys. So when I click on share, it says disabled share, host disabled attendee screen sharing.
I will make you a co-host so you can share, Lindsey. Sorry, this is Melissa. Try again. Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Okay, this is better. All right, this is weird because I have a little screen on the big screen. This is okay. Can you guys see my monitoring universe?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
A little hard to read.
Yeah, it's kind of small. There's a lot of stuff in here, but I could zoom in a little because it just looks crazy. This is where I house the facilities that I monitor in the whole state of Oregon. So like here's Albany Police Department. The grayed out ones are non-secure. So I just kind of spot check them, make sure, you didn't put anything secure in there. But otherwise this is the last time I inspected Albany was August of last year. We just have these little columns on things the feds like to see. And then of course the address and who I need to communicate with when I need to reach out. So their information, I have like the Oregon state classifications. I write down what is at that particular facility. So I remember what to look for when I go back. So like individual hard cells, lockable interview rooms, stationary cuffing apparatuses. We got the federal classification. And then how many of each item there are or whatnot. Do they have an alternative space for status offenders because they can't be in secured areas? And then most of this is Ryan's notes, so I just left them in here, just describing what they are. But anyways, and so over here, like I keep my notes throughout every instance of contact I have. I write over here, like, did I get their data? How much data did I get? When did I reach out for a site visit? And then my notes regarding that. I've got attachments for each facility. I keep their policies in here, their inspection reports, any violation reports, if they have some for the year of data that I went through. We've got floor plans on here and all the good stuff. And then this stuff is just kind of random. But anyway, so that's a little bit about that. But then if I didn't get locked out, okay, this is OJJDP's website of where we go and enter the data after we've compiled it for the year. So I just submitted for October 1st, 2024 through September 30th, 2025. And this starts out on the state profile. So they ask if, what's the age of full criminal responsibility for Oregon? Of course, it's 18. And then the juvenile population, and down here, they want to know how many facilities of each reported their data for the year. We did pretty good this year. We're in, 100% in the 90s. The feds want at least 85% reporting for the whole year. So this is really good. I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with everybody that I communicate with. So, and then the on-site inspections go over here, and then they do their percentages on the numbers I enter. So 94% cumulative percent of facilities reporting last year. So that's great. I'm happy. Number of facilities I visited last year was 57. That's the most I've done in the last 3 years. Happy about that too. Hopefully we have more this year because I took the feds around in February to a bunch of places for the audit. So I haven't counted that up yet, but it'll be coming around October when I start doing that stuff again. We've got the DSO. That's a core requirement I monitor for. This number 27 is the number of accused and adjudicated status offenders who were placed in secure detention or correctional facilities. This is the ICJ number. So Interstate Compact of Juveniles, which is the whole state has like a contract, and they monitor the movement of and return of kids across states and territories. So I reach out to Nina Belli at ICJ, and she looks at these kids that I send to her, who I get from OIA, and then she says if there's violations or not. She gave me a good number, like no violations, but that's how many we had for Oregon, so I have to put that in here for OJJDP to look at. And then the rest is 0, no DSO violations in Oregon. We got separation requirement that I monitor for. The state does have a policy in effect that requires individuals who work with both juveniles and adult inmates to have been trained and certified to work with juveniles. So I put yes. And then this talks about separation in secure detention, separation in jails. If there's any instances of adults and kids commingling, the answer is no, I didn't find any, so we put 0. Jail removal. This is usually where we have some violations. Every year I see at least a few. So we had 3. I think it was 2 different facilities. It's just where, like one of my facilities had a kid that was over 6 hours because he did something bad. They needed to interview him and they didn't get him out in time. So that's an example of one of the number of 3 there. And then sometimes if they put a runaway in a secure environment, then that adds to the total. So I found a couple of those. So don't do that again. Put them somewhere else. So yeah, not bad. It's not a bad number. And then when you put in these numbers, they automatically calculate all of these, however they calculate them down here. We're not out of compliance, which is good. And then this we don't really do because it's the new A11B, which is juveniles charged as adults being detained in adult jails or lockups. We don't put the kids in our jails here. We put them in OYA or detention. But we do have a state law that restricts the use of facilities qualifying as these jail lockups for adults to be used for the confinement of juveniles charged as adults and pending the outcome of their trial. Yes, we do. I put yes. And so this is a lot of other states do fill this out because their judges have to go through all of these things, and then they have to follow up down here, like after 30 days, 60 days. And anyways, but we don't do this in Oregon, so I just put 0s. And then what else do we have got here? Like this, they want an example of my monitoring universe. This is not mine, but my attachments are down here, which I just showed you my monitoring universe. So I just kind of query them out into Excel and put the reports down here for them. We don't really have an exception. I said no county in Oregon currently uses VCO. our training policies I have here. I forget who I reach out to for those. It's another department, and I get those from them every year, and so they come over here. And this is what shows that we do have a policy in Oregon that doesn't allow juveniles charge as adults and whatnot. And there's some forms that we need Brian to sign, and they're all up in here. And I think, this is Lawrence's part, so I'll save that. But I think as far as everything goes, we're pretty good. That's what I do for the whole year. And then I get restarted in October. So I'll be reaching out to everybody. So, yeah. And I, just so you guys know, September 21st through the 23rd, I am planning, I'm still working out the logistics with the facilities, but I'm planning on being in Jackson, Josephine, and Douglas counties doing visitations down there for 3 days. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsey.
You're welcome. How do I stop sharing? Over here.
Thank you. So we will move on now to to Lawrence for the racial and ethnic disparities data submission and state plan to reduce disparities.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm going to provide an update on the racial and ethnic disparities data submission, as well as the state plan to reduce disparities. But before I do so, I would like to give you some quick background information. And basically, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, OJJDP, it requires us to submit racial and ethnic disparities plans, which are RAD plans. And we refer to them as RAD reduction plans. And we do this as part of OJJDP's annual Title II compliance data submissions requirements. So these plans are designed on a 3-year continuum. And each year we evaluate them where data reporting is submitted to OJJDP. So currently we are in year 3 of the original 3-year plan, which means next year we will redesign and look at things that work and don't work and see if we can do something different to help reduce and eliminate disparities within the juvenile justice system here in Oregon. So some key aspects of OJJDP RAD reporting is that we must implement policy practice and a system improvement strategy to identify and reduce racial and ethnic disparities, within the juvenile justice system. So we're required to provide RAD plans that kind of use a 3-pronged research-driven outcomes-based strategy. And what that means is we submit statewide data on juvenile justice statistics. We develop an action plan, which is the 3-year plan, and then we conduct an outcome-based evaluation. And that's what we do every year following the 3-year, following the initial start of the plan. So every year we look back and we kind of reflect on what we're doing well and what we can do better. And that's an outcome-based evaluation. And so in order to do that, we submit statewide data at key juvenile justice decision points where research has shown that potential disparity may occur. So data collection, it must occur at least 4 of the 5 points of data collection points, which are referral. Some states use arrest. We refer to as referral. Diversion, pretrial detention, secure confinement, and adults transfer. So at each data point, our state must provide a percentage distribution of race or ethnic groups compared to the general population distribution in the most recent U.S. Census data. So if you could, Melissa, can you put that table on the screen?
Yes, can you see that okay?
Yes, can everyone see that? Okay.
Seeing some nods. Okay, great.
Yes. So on the screen is a data table representing statistical data for Oregon statewide. data at juvenile justice decision points. And basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide an evaluation analysis of the state's most recent data for juveniles in the juvenile justice system, which this table represents, which is gathered from our state's, the state's juvenile justice information system, referred to as JJUS. And JJUS is basically Oregon's central system for collecting and tracking information on juvenile offenders. The system provides reports on juvenile crime, treatment, sanctions, accountability, dispositions at each stage of involvement in the Oregon juvenile justice system. So what's in front of you is the fiscal year 2025 data, which the table demonstrates disparities at key juvenile justice decision points. And what you'll notice is that the largest disparity appear at the referral point of the system for Black youth and American Indian or Alaska Native youth. The deeper in decision points, especially pretrial detention, secure confinement, and adult transfer, display disparities for American Indian or Alaska Native youth. Diversion rates are comparatively high across all groups, which is a good thing. However, American Indian or Alaska Native youth demonstrate, on average, a 10% lower rate compared to all other groups once referred to the juvenile justice system. Now, if we break these down into the different decision points, you'll notice that at the referral decision point, the most pronounced disparity at this decision point is for Black youth, followed closely by American Indian or Alaska Native youth. And we can kind of go over the numbers if you kind of follow me. And basically the referral rate for white youth is 1.54% compared with Black or African American youth at 4.73%, American Indian or Alaska Native youth at 3.59%, Hispanic or Latinx youth at 1.64%, and Asian youth, which is lower, the group that's lower compared to white, at 0.75%. So basically, these numbers indicate that Black youth are referred at 3.08 times the rate of white youth, while American Indian or Alaska Native youth are referred at 2.33 times the white rate. Hispanic and or Latino youth are close to parity with white youth at 1.07, while Asian youth are below the white rate at 0.49. If you look at the diversion rate, white youth represents 78.92%, Black or American youth represent 82.53%. Asian youth comes in at 79.65%. Hispanic or Latinx youth at 74.08%. And American Indian or Alaska Native youth at 67.8%. So this data shows diversion is used broadly, which is a good thing. But American Indian or Alaska Native youth are diverted at a lower rate than other groups. Black youth, however, have the highest diversion percentage, slightly above white youth, and Asian youth are near parity with white youth. Hispanic or Latino youth are modestly lower, while American Indian or Alaska Native youth have the lowest diversion rates of all groups. If you look at the pretrial detention, white youth comes in at 33.8%, Black youth or African American youth at 39.63%, Hispanic or Latino youth, 34.47%, American Indian or Alaska Native youth, 60.98%, and Asian youth at 25%. So again, pretrial detention displays disparity in the data table, particularly for American Indian or Alaska Native youth. American Indian or Alaska Native youth have the highest pretrial detention rate, nearly 1.8 times the white rate. Black youth are also higher than white youth at 1.7, while Hispanic or Latinx youth are close to parity at 1.02, and Asian youth are below the white rate. And when we come to secure confinement, it demonstrates white youth at 1.73%, Black or African American youth at 1.99%, Hispanic or Latinx youth at 2.76%, American Indian or Alaska Native youth at 5.37%, and Asian youth at 3.49%. So disparities are pronounced at the deepest system involvement for American Indian or Alaska Native youth and appear for Asian and Hispanic or Latino youth at secure confinement. American Indian or Alaska Native youth, again, have the highest rate at 3.1 times the white rate. Asian youth are at 2.01 times the white rate, and Hispanic or Latinx youth are at 1.6 times the white rate. Black youth are slightly above white youth at 1.15. So because the numbers are small at this stage, percentage differences should be interpreted carefully. These are much smaller numbers, so they may appear higher than what the case may have really involved. And at the adult transfer, white youth, we see there's 3, Black or African American youth, there was 1, Hispanic and Latinx youth was 0. American Indian or Alaska Native youth was 1, and Asian youth was 0. So although the calculated percentage for American Indian or Alaska Native youth is 0.149% compared with 0.07 for white youth, the smaller number again of cases makes this rate unstable. One additional case can substantially change the percentage and ratio. So the smaller numbers we have to kind of be careful with when you're looking at these percentages. Adult transfer is monitored, but conclusions should be cautious because the underlying counts are very low. Case level review would demonstrate a clearer analysis for this decision point. So looking closer at that particular case or those particular cases would demonstrate a clearer analysis for this decision point. If we look at the groups and starting with American Indian or Alaska Native youth, across the data table, American Indian or Alaska Native youth experience elevated rates at several key points. Referral was at 3.59%. Diversion was the lowest diversion rate at 7.8%. Pretrial detention, they had the highest rate at 60.98%. Secure confinement, again, those numbers, be careful with that. Highest rate at 3.37%. And again, adult transfer, highest percentage, though, based on only 1 case. However, this pattern suggests that disparities are not isolated to one decision point for this group. Instead, American Indian or Alaska Native youth appear to experience a cumulative disadvantage across multiple stages. Black youth show the largest disparity at initial contact and have the highest referral rate at 4.73%, more than 3 times the white rate. However, their diversion rate is the highest at 82.53%, which may reduce some deeper system penetration. Their pretrial detention and secure confinement rates remain above white youth, but are not as elevated as the initial referral disparity. They suffer a lot of initial contact, but luckily their diversion rates are among the highest, which helps mitigate some of the deeper penetration in the juvenile justice system for Black youth. Hispanic or Latinx youth, disparities emerge later in the process for this group, who have a referral rate close to white youth, but their secure confinement rate is higher than white youth. In Asian youth show a lower referral rate and lower pretrial detention rate than white youth, but their secure confinement rate is higher. Again, because the number of secure confinement cases is small, this finding should be interpreted cautiously and reviewed within case level context. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Island data are not available. The table lists population of 0 for Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander youth. Race cannot be calculated because the population denominator is 0. So this group is not identified as a separate race ethnicity category in our juvenile justice contact point data. So basically, 2025 statewide data demonstrates racial and ethnic disparities are most pronounced at the referral point for Black youth and at multiple deeper system decision points for American Indian or Alaska Native youth. Black youth were referred at more than 3 times the rate of white youth, while American Indian or Alaska Native youth had elevated rates of referral, the lowest diversion percentage, and highest rates of pretrial detention and secure confinement. Although diversion rates were generally high across groups, lower diversion and higher detention for American Indian or Alaska Native youth suggests a need for a focused review of screening, eligibility, detention, alternatives, and access to culturally responsive services. Because some later stages outcomes involve small numbers, especially adult transfer, those findings should be interpreted cautiously. I think it's important to understand that, our state, Oregon, continues to examine the factors contributing to disproportionality and disparities reflected in this statewide data table. Our state remains, in the work that we do, committed to implementing reduction strategies in partnership with state, local, and tribal partners. And our ongoing collaboration with juvenile justice stakeholders continues to strengthen efforts to reduce disparities across Oregon's juvenile justice system. So that's kind of where we are with our numbers for the previous year. We're working tirelessly to help reduce some of that and eliminate some of those disparities. Some groups fared well in some areas, some groups did not fare well at all. And we're working tirelessly to correct some of those disparities and distortions. Does anyone have any questions?
Lawrence, just one question. Zan speaking. This is the 3rd year of the plan. Do you have trend data for all 3 of those years? And have there been any improvements in the 3-year period, or are we looking about the same?
Yes, we've had improvement, but it's very minimal. So unless you really dig into the nuances, it almost looks the same. But we're heading in the right direction. Some groups have seemed to slip back this year, in particular, American Indian, Alaska Native. But some groups have fared well as far as diversion, as far as secure confinement, pretrial detention. The referral rate has jumped for some other groups, but again, it kind of balances out with some of the other services that's provided to them once they are introduced to the juvenile justice system. So we're making headway. It's just not as heavy and quick as we would like it to be.
Thank you. Are there other questions for Lawrence on this topic? Yeah, that trend data, it would very much be of interest as we move forward. And I'm also curious as to whether there's any correlation with the economy in a given year as to how many initial referrals we see. Lawrence, you're up for the next item as well, for the 2024 Title II RFA development update.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So, FY 2024 Title II development updates, and basically the Prevention and Justice team had a consultation with ODE Procurement on the 18th of August to basically discuss moving forward with a request for applications concerning the fiscal year 2024 Title II grant funding. The meeting provided us with a framework on what path of soliciting we could introduce to interested entities. So this included letters of interest and specific language in the RFA outlining the scope of the project, as well as a statement of work from potential grantees of their availability to on current performance and ability to perform the work that we're asking them to do. So this can include verifying any relationships with juvenile probation departments, as well as community-based programming that demonstrates delinquency prevention or diversion from juvenile detention. There will be 3 project areas with grant funding available in each area of $150,000 with a duration of up to 18 months. We're looking at possible extensions of time, not necessarily funding, but time to include in the 3 project areas, as well as the funding of 150,000 each. The 3 project areas will be transformative probation efforts, and we'll work with that language and wording, wordsmith that a little bit, but it's focusing on some sort of probation efforts, delinquency prevention, and community programs and services that tie into the probation efforts, and of course, racial and ethnic disparity reduction. Our interest is really geared for grantees of these funds to demonstrate what changes are being made for the program areas, and how they're being done, what is the cost, as well as what and how are we able to measure the outputs and outcomes that they say that they will produce. So with that, we are kind of in the process of creating a letter of interest to our Title II needs, for our Title II needs, and designing an RFA that addresses sub-award requirements, risk assessment, post-award requirements, which include data, reporting, et cetera, things like that, in compliance with all of these requirements. So we're in the initial stages. We went through the consultation with the ODE procurement to see exactly what we need to do to have a seamless transition of creating what we need to create, soliciting those who would qualify, and going through the procurement process to distribute these funds as quickly as possible, so the youth in our state can benefit from the services that we're trying to provide for them. So does anyone have any questions on that?
Zan here. Lawrence, one question. Are you seeing any change at the federal level in how these funds are being used and the examination of racial and ethnic disparity?
Not racial and ethnic disparity, but there has been some language concerning future grant funding opportunities. Fiscal year 2024 is secured, and the requirements are kind of written in stone already for us, so we're rolling with that designation as to what was provided to us. But moving forward, there is some language that we are in conflict with, I would say. I will let Anya speak on that. So if anyone doesn't have any further questions for me, I'll pass it to Anya at this time.
Thanks, Lawrence, and thank you for your updates. So what we have next on the agenda is fiscal year 25 Title II federal award status. So this is what's happening with it. First, we received an award that we were not able to receive because we didn't meet some of the requirements to be in a position to accept the award. But then another thing happened, and that's because we were missing one position on our state advisory group, which we're resolving through the governor's office, and we received an application from a person that's pending the governor's appointment. So we sort of solving the issue on our end. However, when we read the award letter, it has 4 conditions that Oregon cannot accept, and all 4 relating to immigration enforcement. It requires active participation from the state and subgrantees. So basically, whatever is required of conditions that we accept as a state of Oregon have to be passed along to every single subrecipient of the grant. So those 4 conditions are very, very very strong language that was not there before, even in the previous administration of this current president. So with that, we were approached by Oregon Department of Justice attorneys who pretty much informed us that Oregon is joining a lawsuit against the conditions of the Title II awards and some other awards that are being issued by. So it's U.S. Department of Justice, and under U.S. Department of Justice, there's Office of Justice Programs, and that's the funding arm of the U.S. Department of Justice. So we're contesting several grants that states receive, specifically those 4 conditions. So we're not alone in this. Oregon, California, and Washington joined state of New Jersey, who initiated that lawsuit. I don't know if there were any additional states involved since we had this conversation, but that's what's happening. So the expected timeline for resolution is, our attorney feels that should be done by mid-November. But there is a process, of course. So the lawsuit was filed in whichever district is New Jersey in the federal court. So until then, we don't know. But I shouldn't say we don't worry, but we just started our fiscal year 23 funding, and we haven't even allocated 24 funds. So it's not a dire situation, but of course, there's always a concern about availability of funding in the future. So we'll see. We'll keep you updated. But right now, we were hoping, Lawrence and I, that we could use 24 and 25 awards at the same time and have an RFA for both. But we cannot, obviously, we cannot solicit requests for funding that we don't have.
Thank you, Anya.
Of course.
Sad news. Are there any questions for Anya? Is there any other business before the Juvenile Justice Committee of the Youth Development Council at this time? If not, we are now, it's now just about 1:15, and would like to invite any members of the public that may be present to comment if they wish to do so.
This is Melissa, and we don't have any guests from the public on today's meeting, so we don't have any requests for making public comment today.
Okay, then it's time for meeting roundup and closing comments. Brian, do you have any comments, Anya, that you would like to bring to us as we close?
Well, I just appreciate you all being here. Juliette, for your presentation, that was awesome. Lots of information. So that's my closing comment.
I'll just second that. Thanks, Anya, and thanks, to our presenter, to Juliette, and for answering questions. Thanks, council members, for your questions and comments. This is your time and opportunity. We'll have a presentation, maybe, I don't know, Juliette, maybe there'll be little tweaks from today that you'll incorporate into our presentation to the full council in September. So just looking forward to that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to staff for pulling everything for everyone together. And I see Nella dropped in a registration link for the Juvenile Justice Summit, so check that out. And yeah, just thanks, Zan, for facilitating, chairing the meeting today. I know Jeff, it looks like Jeff wasn't able to participate, but we'll see him in September, I'm sure.
Thank you. Well, once I got the agenda up before me, it made it much easier.
Well, thank you, Zan, for volunteering. I really, really appreciate it.
And yes, it was a good meeting. It was interesting, and I look forward to seeing many of you in September. At this point, we will adjourn the meeting at 1:16 p.m.
Thanks all.
Everyone, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Bye.
one.